Today, I'm going to explain a thriller and sci-fi film called Sunshine. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. By 2050, the sun's light has started to fade due to a dark energy destabilizing the star. With the threat of extinction, the Icarus project was launched to reignite the sun, but the mission failed. 7 years later, another crew was sent to restart the sun by delivering a stellar bomb, with a mass equivalent to Manhattan Island. After 16 months of space travel, Icarus 2, which consists of a crew of 8 scientists, arrives close to the dead zone, where radio communications to Earth are no longer possible. Dr. Searle, the ship's site counselor and medical officer, asks the ship's artificial intelligence system, Icarus, to filter down the ship's observation room portal, so he could see as much of the sun's brightness without burning his eyes. Icarus tells him that the current brightness is at 2%. He asks the computer to show him 4%, but Icarus warns him that it will cause irreversible damage to his retina. The computer recommends observing the sun at 3.1% but only for 30 seconds. Searle wears his sunglasses and sets the filter to the settings recommended by the AI. When the rays hit his eyes, he's overwhelmed by the brightness, but when it's over, he laughs in exhilaration. He recommends the same activity to the other crew members, saying it's like taking a shower in light. Kaneda, the ship's captain, tells the crew that the solar wind reading is getting much higher as they approach the sun, making it more difficult to communicate with Earth. They're flying into the dead zone 7 days earlier than anticipated, so he tells the crew to send their final message to Earth within the next 24 hours. Robert Capa, the physicist responsible for the stellar payload's delivery and detonation, enters the communications room to send a message to his parents. He makes several attempts because he has difficulty finding the right words. Capa reminds them that it will take 8 minutes for the sun's light to reach the Earth. They'll eventually know that the mission succeeded when they wake up one morning and see that the sky is a little brighter than usual. Corazon, the ship's botanist maintaining the oxygen garden, walks into the observation room to report to Kaneda, who appears to be trying Searle's recommendation. Corazon reports that they have enough oxygen reserves to deliver their stellar payload. She senses that Kaneda is thinking of Icarus 1, so she tells him that she doesn't think that the first mission failed due to the lack of oxygen. Elsewhere in the ship, a fight breaks out between Capa and Mace, the ship's engineer, because Capa had taken too long inside the communications room. Mace is furious because the interference in the atmosphere is preventing his message from reaching Earth. Harvey, the communications specialist, and Trey, the ship's navigator, burst into the room to break up the fight. Mace visits Searle in his room and tells him that he has lost track of his mind due to the length of time they have spent on the ship. Searle tells Mace to spend 2 hours in the Earth room so he could calm down. In the Earth room, he watches the large waves splashing against the seawall as 3 women are having fun trying to stand up against the force of the tide. When Icarus brings him to a forest, he asks the computer to bring back the waves because it makes him feel peaceful. Later on, Mace approaches Capa to apologize. Meanwhile, Kaneda has begun reviewing the video logs of Captain Pinbacker, who led Icarus 1. Pinbacker informs Moon Base that the ship has encountered a minor asteroid storm that caused punctures to the ship. Pinbacker notes that the damage to their ship was nothing serious, and they were able to repair it. The captain went on to say that he was able to witness the asteroid hitting the ship from the observation room. Kaneda is puzzled when he hears Pinbacker describe it as a beautiful event. Cassie, the pilot, suddenly calls the crew's attention to report that they've come close to Mercury. The crew members gather around the observation room and watch in awe as the planet slowly orbits the sun. As the ship flies over Mercury, Harvey suddenly hears a transmission that seems to be originating from Icarus 1. Harvey discloses that it's the ship's distress beacon. Corazon says that the crew could still be alive because their oxygen is self-replenishing, and their water is recycled. The first team only have food that could last for 3 years, but Kaneda points out that the ship might have some survivors if others had perished. The ship's AI pinpoints the beacon's location, revealing that they almost made it to the sun. They learn that they are going to pass by the ship within 10 or 15,000 miles. Trey informs them that he could adjust their trajectory to fly to Icarus 1, but Mace dissuades the crew, saying they need to complete their mission to reignite the sun. Searle agrees that there is nothing more important than their primary goal, but he argues that they might have more chances of succeeding if they find Icarus 1. If they fly to the ship's location, they'll have 2 bombs to give them a better chance at reactivating the sun. Mace and Trey point out that there are risks in Searle's suggestion because they still don't know what caused the first mission to fail. Searle asks the crew to determine if the risk of the detour would outweigh the benefits of having another bomb. Mace suggests a vote, but Kaneda tells them that the decision should fall on the most qualified person on the ship. Capa is perturbed that the decision falls on him. Capa runs the simulations to look at their chances of succeeding, but the AI tells him that there's not enough information to make an accurate prediction. Capa tells Kaneda that the best he can do is make an educated guess. Capa recommends going to Icarus 1, noting that they've already mined the last of Earth's fissile materials to create the bomb. If they fail, they won't be able to create another payload. When Capa wakes up from a bad dream, Cassie surmises that he's dreaming about the surface of the sun. She confesses that it's the only thing she sees when she closes her eyes. While Cassie reassures Capa about the decision he made, they suddenly hear the alarms blare throughout the ship. When they get to the bridge, Trey tells them that he made a mistake when he changed the ship's trajectory to take the detour to Icarus 1. Although coordinates were accurate, He had forgotten to adjust the shields that protect the ship from the sun's heat. Kaneda asks the crew to determine the extent of the damage to the ship, but the sensors outside are no longer working, so they have to go out to see what was affected by the mishap. Kaneda volunteers, but Harvey notes that it's a two-person job. Mace insists on sending Kappa out because he thinks that the tragic error was the result of Kappa's decision to take the detour. Kappa agrees to go, so he heads to the airlock to don an EVA suit. Cassie instructs Icarus to rotate the ship so that the damage would face away from the sun. Harvey warns them that 2 communications towers will be lost if the ship turns. Mace says that the towers are of no use to them at the moment, but Harvey points out that they need them to go home. Cassie hints that they'll figure something out after they complete their mission. As the ship rotates, Icarus reports that comms towers 3 and 4 have been severely damaged. Harvey tells the computer to turn off the alarm and the sensors of the towers. Kappa and Kaneda investigate the damaged area on the shield and finds that there are 4 busted panels. Corazon cautions Kappa to calm down because he's using his oxygen too fast. Later on, Kaneda reports that they have closed the first panel. The team rejoices when Kaneda notifies them that they can repair the damages. While the ship turns, a beam of light reflecting from the burning comms tower causes a fire on the oxygen garden. With 3 panels to go, Kaneda is alarmed by the ship's sudden movements. Corazon soon realizes that the ship is venting oxygen. Cassie tries to control the ship manually, but the AI refuses. Icarus reports that the override protocol to allow manual flight control has been removed because the mission is in jeopardy. When Cassie asks for the reason, Icarus informs them that there's a fire in the oxygen garden. Corazon runs to the garden as Cassie seals the doors to prevent the fire from breaking out. Cassie tells Kappa and Kaneda to go back to the airlock, but Kaneda refuses. He tells them that the ship will burn if the shields are not repaired. Trey points out that Kaneda and Kappa will be incinerated if they remain outside while the ship rotates, so Cassie uses the emergency command code to override the computer. However, the protocol requires another human confirmation, but Mace refuses to approve the override. When Harvey confirms the override command, Mace tells Icarus to take back control of the ship and asks the captain to back him up. Kaneda agrees with Mace, reminding the crew that their priority is to secure the payload. The captain then instructs Icarus to resume the emergency procedure to protect the ship. Corazon tries to get into the oxygen garden as it burns, but Icarus tells her that a superior comms officer has sealed it. Icarus notes that there is a 60% chance of failing to contain the fire and a 75% chance of collateral damage to their life support systems. Mace suggests flooding the section with oxygen to trigger a flashover and extinguish the fire. They open the oxygen tanks, causing the room to blow up. Kaneda tells Kappa to go back inside, saying he can finish the job on his own. Kappa walks to the edge of the shield as Kaneda continues to repair the panels. Kappa tells the captain to move as the ship turns and exposes the shield to the sunlight. Moments later, Kaneda informs the team that the final panel has been sealed. Knowing that he won't make it to the edge, Kaneda decides to wait for the sun's powerful rays to hit him. Searle, furious about the sun's radiance, repeatedly asks Kaneda what he sees as he burns. Kappa hides beneath the shield until the rotation is completed. Trey blames himself for losing the captain, so Searle diagnoses him as a suicide risk and sedates him. Harvey assumes command of the ship and reports that the shields and the payload are intact. He informs the crew that the garden is totally destroyed, so they don't have enough oxygen to deliver the payload. He asserts that the team has no choice but to go to Icarus 1 to complete the mission. Corazon tells Cassie and Mace that there is enough oxygen to get them to the delivery point, but not for 7 people. She says they'll have to lose 3 crew members to get them to the sun. Cassie goes to Kappa's room and expresses her fear that they're probably going to die like the crew of Icarus 1. She asks Kappa if he's afraid. Kappa tells her that he's not because he thinks birthing a new star from the dying sun would be wonderful. Upon reaching Icarus 1, Searle, Kappa, Harvey, and Mace enter the ship to inspect it. The crew decides to split up to cover more area. Harvey orders Mace to get to the flight deck to find out if the ship can still fly. He orders Kappa to go directly to the payload and asks Searle to check the social area and the quarters. Harvey heads to the garden and discovers that the plants have grown splendidly. He's ecstatic that they'll have enough oxygen for the mission. Corazon is delighted to hear about Harvey's discovery as well. Upon reaching the bridge, Mace learns that the ship is mostly functional, but he can't get the flight computer to work. While Searle inspects the kitchen, he finds out that the ship still has enough food. As Mace examines the equipment at the bridge, a video log of Pinbacker suddenly appears on one of the screens. With burn marks all over his face, Pinbacker discloses that the crew has abandoned the mission, believing that their attempt to reignite the sun is foolish. Pinbacker rambles that it's not their place to challenge God if he decides that humanity should die. Mace learns that the transmission was made 6.5 years ago. Corazon notes that Icarus 1 was supposed to be delivering the bomb by that time. Kappa soon notifies the team that the payload is fully operational. Cassie is pleased to hear the news, thinking that they'll be able to fly Icarus 1 to the delivery point. Mace, however, tells them that they can't fly the ship because the mainframe coolant has failed. He further reveals that it was an act of sabotage. Meanwhile, Searle has found the remains of the crew in the observation room. He concludes from the way they are positioned that the previous team had burned themselves by turning off the observation deck's filter. As he inspects the burned corpses, the airlock connecting the 2 ships breaks apart. The crew members at Icarus 1 scramble to go back to the airlock, Cassie tells them that she can hold the position of Icarus II, but the ship won't be able to dock again. In addition to the mishap at the airlock, Icarus I is also losing atmosphere due to a breach. Mace finds an EVA suit and tells them at least one of them will survive. He insists that Kappa should wear it because the other members are low priority. Harvey objects, saying that the ship will need a captain to keep the mission together. Cyril argues that Kappa is the only one capable of detonating the payload, so they have no choice. Harvey orders Kappa to remove the suit, hinting that he'll help them when he returns to Icarus II. However, Mace points out that they won't be able to restore pressure when they break the seal to the airlock. Mace soon realizes that Kappa will be ejected from Icarus I once they open the airlock, so he tells Cassie to move Icarus II as close to their ship as possible. Mace is hoping to join Kappa when he ejects even without a suit. Corazon warns him that they'll freeze to death, but Mace thinks that it's still worth a try. Cyril reminds them that the computer's down, so one of them has to operate the seal manually. Harvey thinks that they'll force him to stay behind, but Cyril volunteers. Cassie soon notifies them that the two ships are already aligned. Mace tells Harvey to keep his eyes shut and slowly exhale when they get outside. When Cyril opens up the airlock, the three crew members are propelled toward Icarus II. Not long, Kappa reaches the airlock of Icarus II. When he sees Mace drift away, he grabs him and flings him inside. Kappa sees Harvey, but he has drifted too far. The AI detects the crew members inside and seals the outer airlock door. As Harvey floats in space, he opens his eyes in shock as he runs out of air and freezes to death. Back in the ship, Corazon and Cassie rush to the airlock to cover Mace with thick blankets to warm him up. As Icarus II leaves, Cyril enters Icarus I's observation room to watch the sun's full brightness. He sits beside the bodies of the first team and waits for the rays to burn through the observation deck. Later, Mace finds out from Icarus activity file that there was no malfunction in the airlock hardware. They conclude that the airlock has been separated manually but couldn't figure out who did it as Corazon was with Cassie on the flight deck while the other members were on Icarus. Mace suspects that it was Trey, but Kappa points out that he could hardly walk due to the medication Cyril gave him, and he sleeps 23 hours a day. Corazon notes that there is another issue they have to deal with aside from the disaster at the airlock. She points out that they lost 2 people consuming oxygen when Cyril and Harvey died. If Trey dies, they will have enough oxygen to make it to the delivery point. Repulsed by the idea, Kappa hints that what happened at Icarus I is now happening on their ship. Mace volunteers to kill Trey, but he says he will not do it unless they vote unanimously. Kappa and Corazon vote to eliminate Trey, but Cassie refuses. Mace apologizes to Cassie, hinting that he'll go ahead and kill Trey despite her vote. Cassie asks him to make it easy for Trey. Mace grabs a surgical knife and goes to Trey's pod but finds out that he's not there. He checks another room and discovers Trey on the floor with a deep cut on his wrist. Mace blames Kappa for all the deaths in the ship, saying no one would have died if they didn't divert the mission. He dips his hand on Trey's blood and wipes it on Kappa's hand. Kappa gets furious and slams Mace against the wall. After struggling for a few moments, the 2 men run out of breath, so they stop fighting. Corazon tells them that they need to limit their exertions because the air is low. Later on, Kappa tells Icarus to run the biometric signs of the crew members and check oxygen consumption. Icarus discloses that they don't have enough oxygen to deliver the payload because they will die in 16 hours, and it will take 19 hours till they get to the delivery point. He points out to the AI that Corazon was certain they have enough oxygen for 4 crew members. The computer, however, reveals that there are 5 people on board the ship. Icarus can't identify the 5th person, but it points out that the unknown crew member is in the observation room. When Kappa reaches the observation room, he sees a man with severe burns all over his body. Kappa recalls the last video log he saw from Icarus I and realizes that he's Pinbacker. As Kappa stares at him in horror, Pinbacker slashes him on the chest with a knife. Kappa runs out of the room and shuts down the filter at the observation deck. He calls out to other crew members, but no one answers. Pinbacker runs after Kappa, so he locks himself into the inner airlock. Pinbacker pulls a lever on the door to keep Kappa locked inside. Pinbacker then goes to the mainframe room to remove the computer panels from the coolant. Meanwhile, Corazon visits the garden and sees a tiny plant growing. Corazon becomes more hopeful about their mission and tells Icarus to patch her to Mace. However, Pinbacker quietly approaches her and stabs her in the back. Mace soon notices that Icarus is no longer responding. Cassie wakes up in her room and senses that someone is with her. When she sees Pinbacker at the other end of the hall, she runs to the front of the ship and hides. Mace turns on the monitors and sees Kappa in the inner airlock, so he instructs Kappa to use the communications link in the EVA helmet. Kappa tells him that Pinbacker is on board to sabotage their mission. When Mace arrives at the mainframe room, he discovers that the computers have been removed from the coolant. He tries to lower the mainframe, but he discovers that the mechanism is disabled. Mace decides to dive into the coolant so he can pull the mainframe down manually. Mace manages to lower the first mainframe, causing the lights to turn back on. While looking for Cassie, Pinbacker is agitated by the light and punches his hand through a glass wall. When he grabs Trey's corpse, Cassie stabs him. Cassie runs away as Pinbacker screams in pain. Mace drops another mainframe, but he starts to shiver due to the low temperature of the liquid coolant. Cassie ends up in the payload room while running from Pinbacker. Mace prompts Kappa to break the ship out of orbit manually by separating the payload. He then tells Kappa that he has to open the airlock and detonate the bomb. As he lowers the third mainframe, his leg gets caught in the mechanism. Mace struggles to get out, but he freezes to death. Kappa wears an EVA suit and burns the inner door to escape the airlock. After releasing the door of the outer airlock, he holds on tight to the metal bars as loose parts of the ship fly out, along with Corazone's body. When he reaches the mainframe room, he finds Mace lying frozen on the ground. He proceeds to detach the payload from the ship and make his way to the airlock. He trips on his way out and struggles to get up due to the weight of the EVA suit, but he eventually manages to propel himself to the bomb as it separates from the ship. When he reaches the bomb, the propulsion sets Icarus to ablaze. Inside the payload, he takes off his EVA suit and unlocks the door to the payload unit to pilot the bomb into the sun manually. When he sees Cassie, he asks her if Pinbacker is with them. Pinbacker suddenly grabs Kappa by the neck, telling him that God asked him to take all of humanity to heaven. As the two struggle, Cassie attacks Pinbacker, ripping the skin off his hands. After breaking free from Pinbacker's grip, Cassie and Kappa slide across the payload. Cassie tells Kappa to finish the mission, so he runs to the payload's control room and ignites the bomb manually. Kappa watches the payload begin to light up as it enters the surface of the sun. As the flames burst into the room, Kappa reaches out to the fire and accepts his death, knowing that he had succeeded in his mission. Back on Earth, Kappa's sister watches his last transmission, where he asks her to kiss her kids for him. She and her children watch the sun's rays pierce through the clouds and shine across the frozen Sydney harbor.